Hello and welcome to the Essential Being podcast with myself, your host, Jolene Whiting. I have been a pole dance teacher for nearly 20 years. I'm also a yoga instructor, and my favourite pastimes are connecting to my own sensuality, connecting with the world, and connecting with animals as well. In this podcast, you'll find new and inventive ways of how you see yourself, connecting yourself with others, and also how you see and view the world around you. In this episode, we talk about how the universe is actually looking out for you, how to listen and be aware of the signs that might be coming your way, and also really tuning in to our intuition. Hello, Essential Being, and welcome back to the podcast. It's such a pleasure and an honor to have you here today. And if nobody's told you this yet today, thank you. Thank you for being you. Thank you for being here. And thank you for sharing this time together on Earth side with me. Because without you, the world wouldn't be what it is. So thank you for being here. Our episode today comes from a little bit of vulnerability for myself because recently I've had a bit of an issue which has it's been a lack of support, and it's stemmed via social media. Now, a lot of you will know how I feel about social media, whilst I do my best to try and reframe it because I know that there are good properties with it. I mean, for example, this podcast is coming via the internet to you, which is amazing. You may have even found it through my Instagram page, which is amazing. So therefore, social media has got brilliant sides, but it isn't always good. So as you know, like with the podcast, I try and stay away from looking at the stats because at the end of the day, it's about reaching people, it's also not about me getting caught up in that. So you know, like when you get caught up in like how many followers you've got and I've lost one today and all of this, I class that as it's not real stuff, but it can get to you. So we have to be really careful with what we take on. And at the end of the day, we have a choice of what we take on. And if you do take on some sort of negative feeling, you need to ask yourself why. And that's exactly what's happened to me lately. So I've had this real lack of support over the past couple of weeks on social media. And it was in reference to something that I'd put out, which meant a hell of a lot to me, like so much. And I even detailed in this video just how important this was to me and how much of a big deal it was. So I was vulnerable online, and on one of the platforms, it got absolutely no interaction. And now I'm not doing stuff for interaction, but this particular thing, I think because it was so vulnerable for me, it really hurt that in some ways, like on some platforms, you can even physically see who has actually seen it and decided to not say anything. Now that sort of thing hurts. Now, when I went to my partner and I said about this, I said, before I start talking about, because he's like, what's upset you? You're not right. You're not happy. And I was like, no, I'm not. And then when I did talk to him about it, I said, look, before I talk, you need to know that I know that this stuff isn't real. This is the part social media plays in our life. It's the algorithm and things like that mess with us and makes us distracted. So I talk about distractions a lot on the podcast, things that distract us from what is actually really going on. And this is one of those things. Now, I let it get to me. And this was a choice. I didn't deliberately let it get to me, as in consciously, but unconsciously, I allowed it in. I allowed this negative side to creep in, and it really hurt. And then I was trying to think, why does it hurt? And I couldn't work it out. And then it hit me that, and I have now, when this hit me, I thought, this isn't the first time I have felt this or seen it or experienced it. We are starting to live in a world, and social media has this part to play in it. We are starting to live in a world where people don't say congratulations or well done to each other. To be honest, the only time I really ever see that in full force is when somebody has a baby. Congratulations. Everybody comes out the woodwork to say that. But when you hit different milestones in your life, particularly within like maybe your career or your passion or your artistry or your craft, a lot of the time people don't say well done or congratulations. Now, this will also stem back into inward validation. And the reason why I talk about this is because I feel this stuff too. I am not inhuman. I am so human, which is why I put this out there. So the things that I put out, particularly about inward validation and the choice we have of what we take on, is so important because I actually feel this too. Now, I'm not actually doing things in my life for other people to say, well done. My validation does come from within, and I know that. But what's scary is the thought of living in a world where people don't want to share the love and support each other and bring each other up. That hurts me. That hurts me a lot. To think that there are people birthing their creations into the world, sharing their offerings and their gifts with people. And people, particularly ones that you know or you think are your friends, just don't say anything to you. Now, is that the sort of world that we want to live in? I mean, for me, no. No. And I wonder if this stuff actually happened to make me realize my own true essence of what I do when I show up and why it's so important to share this with you, because you need to realize your own true essence as well. And this is why this is so important. This is why I'm sharing this with you, because I questioned everything. And I mean everything. I questioned everything because I was thinking, should I even be doing what I'm doing? And it really hit home. It really hurt. One of the things that I did straight away when I was really questioning everything was I turned to my compliment book for a little bit of outward validation. So I've got this compliment book, which I've written down loads of things people have said to me over the years, various different things in different situations, things, how I've helped them, how they've enjoyed my company, or just anything. So I turned to that, and that was help. It didn't solve it, but it planted the seed to turn this around. So if you don't have one of these, you can have this for anything, any part of your life. It doesn't have to be just your work. It can be just a compliment book that you just write down nice things that you've experienced or that people have said to you. And then at times like this is when you turn to it. So a lot of people, a bit like people who say that, oh, I don't meditate, but I just turn to meditation when I need it. You need to do this stuff all the time so it's ready for you. So this compliment book was ready for me. So I turned to that. And that did help. Like I said, it didn't solve everything, but it did help. And I also had my retreat last week, the Essential Being retreat. And that got fully booked over a month before it was actually due to go ahead, which was phenomenal. That's not happened to me before. So that was absolutely amazing. And it felt really aligned. And even leading up to it last week, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do on the day, how I wanted it to kind of pan out, it just flowed in my head of how I planned to do it. And then on the day, I was not nervous at all. It's the first time I've done anything like this and not been nervous. So despite how I felt a few days before and I was questioning everything, this retreat felt so aligned. And it felt so much like where I was supposed to be. And I thought, okay, this is interesting because I've never not been nervous before. And I was even leading a chant with it as well, which meant I had to sing outside on my own to start it, because obviously people need to learn it, so you need to do it first. It's the first time I've not been nervous, and I thought, wow, okay, this is interesting. And that retreat I set the parameter with it at the start. I said, we are all here on this adventure in life together. We are all equal and we are rising together. Because it's so important that just because I was hosting it and leading it, I didn't want people to look up to me and put me up on a pedestal. I wanted people to align with me and we are all rising together. I wanted to make sure that that was happening. And I really felt like that did happen, because in the last few days since then, there have been so many signs from the universe. And this is really the core thing of what I wanted to talk to you about today. Was very much along the lines of the universe is actually looking out for you. The universe does have your back. Now, when I say the universe, this can be how you perceive it. So I'm just going to give you a quick lowdown on different words that you might use or not want to use. So you've got the universe, God, the goddess, source. You know, it's that thing that's bigger than you, that you can't explain, but you know is there. It's the faith. It's the faith. It's that feeling. It's just that feeling that there is something bigger than you. Now, what you choose to call it, if you call it something, is so personal. You might like some of my words and you might not. That's okay, because actually the words have got nothing to do with it. It is the feeling. It's the feeling of knowing there's a higher power. There's a higher level of consciousness that's bigger than yourself. It's bigger than me. It's bigger than what you will ever know as somebody here on earth. You will never know exactly how big this is. And that is what's looking after you and guiding you. And I have really felt this so much. So after I started questioning everything, the universe started to almost attack me with signs, and it still is this morning, attack me with signs to say, oi, get out of your own way. Get out of your own way. You are on your mission of what you're doing. You're doing a great job and you're sabotaging it with stuff in your mind that doesn't matter. So in the last few days, I've hit the next milestone on Buzzsprout for downloads for the podcast, which is my how I host the podcast is via Buzzsprout, and they send it out to like Apple, Spotify, and everywhere. So I hit the next milestone of downloads, and I go, bing, got an email, and I was like, oh, bloody hell, that's good. Oh my God, okay. I've also had my downloads tripled, because I get they just send you a weekly email of like, oh, you've had this many downloads this week. It had more than tripled in the last week by hundreds. And I'm like, oh my God. Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. I'm listening. And I've had random comments at random times in the real world about my social media presence and how I show up and what people see. And I'm like, oh my God, this has come to me in the real world. The universe knows I do love the real world more than online. So it's come to me from the online world into my real world saying, by the way, we like this. I'm like, wow, okay. And it really random, just really random. I've also been listening to a couple of podcasts. And there was one podcast I was listening to, and I started it yesterday. It was a couple of hours long, so I don't listen to it in one go. I just listen to it bits at a time. So I finished it today. And yesterday when I started listening to it, I thought, oh, I don't really like the voices on this podcast. You know, some voices you're okay with, some you're not. It wasn't a judgment. It was just some I'm okay with, some I'm not. And something told me, my intuition, it's very subtle, and it told me, no, you've got to carry on listening. So I did. And then this morning, I was doing some yoga whilst I was listening to it, because something told me, you know, you've got to keep listening to it right now. And I was like, okay, all right. And I was listening to it, and they were talking on there about your actions and how much your actions affect other people, And when you like pass over and you get your life review, that is when you'll find out just how strong your actions were and how much they affected other people. And I was like, whoa. And it was just so much on point. Then it went into another podcast because I was busy. So it didn't stop. It just finished that one, went into another one. And again, in this, there was so much talk in it that was just talking to me. And I was like looking around thinking, oh my God, it honestly feels like someone is watching me right now. It was so odd. I've also had people come into me wanting in this past week to work with me. And their reason for doing that is because they keep saying stuff like, you literally seem so authentic in how you are. I think when people get an inclination of how I am in my real life versus how I show up online, in my pole classes, at the retreat, doing this podcast, and then they suddenly see like, oh, this is you. And they want more of this feeling to hopefully they get that feeling. That's how I see it. You know, I'm not better than anybody else, but I will tell you now, how I talk to you on the podcast is how I am. This is literally how I am. So when I get times like last week where I question everything, it feels really hurtful for myself to have these feelings towards myself. But sometimes you've got to go into the darkness. You've got to lean into it and listen to it. You don't want to take it on necessarily, but you need to be in those times of darkness, because we will all have times of darkness throughout our lives for all different reasons, trivial reasons, hard-hitting reasons. We need to be able to discern what is actually the truth that comes from it, but also realizing that there is power, there is light to be found in the darkness. You don't get light without having the dark. You need both sides of it. And if you reframe it and think of it as something like the holy darkness, which I've heard recently, and I was like, that is amazing, because that kind of tells you how sacred the darkness is. So these kind of thoughts that I had last week, they were powerful. They were quite hurtful. And they're all in my own head. You know, this is how important it is. So if something is just in your own head, you know how you hear people say, oh, it's all in your head, don't be so silly. If something is in your own head, that is the most important place. It is the most important place, because anything else you can get away from. If something is in your own head, it's in the most important place in your life, and it needs action. It needs nurturing. It needs looking after. It needs help. Whatever it is, it needs something from you. And only you can recognize that and give yourself that attention that you need. Because if something is in your own head, it's incredibly real. Even if it's just negative self-talk, you're worried about things that might never happen. It's very real because it's in your head. Therefore, it needs your attention. You need to do something about it. So never, ever think just because it's in your own head that it is, you can just bypass it. It's the most important place that you'll ever experience is inside your own head. So it needs looking after. And along those lines, I've heard in the past week of some people's issues that they have got in their lives of what's going on. And when I say issues, I mean these are serious. And it made me think, oh my God, what I do and what I put out there is even more important than I ever realized. So I've really taken on these messages from the universe. And it's realizing that our actions make a difference, no matter how small. So even if you think just giving a little bit of money to somebody on the street, or smiling at a stranger when you walk by, or just saying hello to somebody, don't be so quick to judge somebody, because they don't need your judgment and you don't need to give it. It's like if you give money to a homeless person, I remember I've even had somebody come up to me after I've given money to somebody who was sitting on the street begging for money. And then I walked off. I gave them some money and then I walked off. And then somebody come over to me and tapped me on the shoulder. He said, shouldn't have given that person money. And I went, excuse me? Why are you telling me what to do with my money? And they said, that person's not really homeless. They've got a flat. And I turned to this guy and I said, if that person thinks that they need to sit on the street and beg for money and they've got a place, I don't care what their situation is. If you feel like you need to sit on the street and beg for money, you are in a place that I'm so fortunate that I can't even fathom in my life right now. So yeah, I don't begrudge. I didn't think, oh, that person's got a house to live in, I shouldn't have given them money. I was like, no. I was like, how dare you? Like, no. What people choose to do with their money. I remember one of the times I gave money to somebody. Oh, she looked like a crackhead. Oh my God. If you knew what a crackhead looked like, I thought that she looked like that. I didn't know for sure. You just sort of think, oh God. And I was out in town and this woman was going up to people. She looked so desperate. It was about 9 o'clock at night. It was dark. It was cold. It was a bit wet. She was wet. She was going up to people, hair all bedraggled. And you could see that she was getting no's from everybody. Oh, please can I have some money? Please can you spare some money? Please, 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 please. Now, I got some money. I saw her and I thought, okay. So I got some money out of my purse and I just had it in my pocket. And she came up to us, desperate, but with a look on her face like... It was a look on her face like, if one more person says no to me, I'm done. You know, when you can just see these sort of looks and you think you've been pushed, you are being pushed and you've been pushed. And that wasn't why I gave her money, because I was going to give her money anyway. It's only when she approached me that I saw this look and I thought, whoa. And I said, yes, I've got some money. Wait a second. And so I pulled, I think it was a note. I think it's probably a £5 note. Pulled it out of my pocket. I gave it to her. I said, I really hope that you have a better rest of your night. And her face just completely changed. Completely changed. It was like she got lighter and she lifted in her face. And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. The relief that she had on her face. I don't know what she did with that money. She might have been relieved because she can go buy more crack. I don't know. It was not for me to think. But what it was for me to do was to spread the message that don't give up. The message that there is still good in the world. The message that you're not always going to be judged by people. You know, and you could argue that I was judging her because I thought she looked like a crackhead. I don't know. But, you know, so yes, there is judgment, but it isn't judgment that I'm like, well, I'm not giving anything to you just because you look like it. It wasn't that. It wasn't that. And this is where our actions, they have a huge impact. And you may never know how big an impact that you have. There's so much, particularly in the spiritual community, there's so much on finding your purpose, your divine purpose, your soul purpose. You find your purpose and then you'll be happy. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. So I was on a mission for ages, for years, trying to find my soul purpose. I was like, I've got to find my soul purpose. Got to find it. But your soul purpose is being here. Your soul purpose is not about how much money you make, how many followers you get, how famous you are, how many kids you have, or anything like that. It's not about that. It's not a number game. It's about being you. It's about being. Like when we leave school, there's so much. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you leave school? What are you going to do? What are you going to do when you leave uni? And all this. Whatever happened to just being you and living your life? Is that not enough? Because as soon as you start to lean into that, and that's my mantra at the moment, is to lean in. Lean in. I keep saying that to myself at the moment. Lean in. If there's something that makes you feel uncomfy, lean into it. Don't fight it. What's there? Treat it with curiosity, but lean in. And when people leave school, they think they've got to do something to prove themselves. This is where it comes from. You've got to prove yourself. You've got to do something. Do something with your life. Do something with your qualification. I'm not saying you shouldn't get qualifications. But what I'm saying is you are enough as you are. Just being you and being here, being alive in this moment is enough. And we have all got to remember this, because we are so caught up with having to do something to show who we are. But actually just being, we're human beings. We've heard this before. We're human beings, not human doings. We are here to be. And I don't mean you just sit around and not do anything all day. But when you actually start to lean into yourself on a more spiritual level, which might mean slowing down. It might mean going out into nature. It might mean volunteering and helping somebody or doing something, showing up in a way that is bigger than yourself, that you don't know the outcome and you may never will. It's a bit like when you donate to charity. You don't know the outcome of what's going to happen to your money, but you do it anyway. This sort of thing, this sort of type of showing up in a way of appreciating that it's bigger than you, but that's okay. Not knowing the outcomes, but that's okay. Leaning in to what's uncomfy without trying to fight everything off all the time. And it's remembering that it's not about all or nothing. So if you're trying to do stuff in your life, like you're trying to earn more money or release some weight or change your career or any of these sort of distractions, which are sometimes real potent things that we do need to look at, you need to remember that even if you create, this is what Tony Robbins says, and it's so true, a 2% shift in your life. You change your life by 2% today. The trajectory of where you'll end up within a year's time is phenomenally different to where you are now, just by changing that one little thing. Like the 2% shift. It's a bit like if there's a meteor heading towards Earth and it's coming direct for Earth, and then someone just goes boop and just moves it just by a 1 or 2%. Then it's just going to be miles away from Earth. So if you imagine that type of thing with your life, where would you be in a year's time? It's a bit like, for example, if you want to write a book. Oh, I've got to write the whole book. No, you don't. Why don't you just try and write a paragraph? What would happen if you wrote a paragraph every day for a year? And I bet it wouldn't be a paragraph. I bet it would be more. This is what I'm saying. What about if when you're trying to release weight, what about if you literally just change one of your food ingredients? Just one. And then maybe in a couple of days you change another one. And in a couple of days you change another one. You're not talking about changing your whole entire lifestyle. These small changes make big differences. The small actions that we take in our life make big changes. And when we really sink into this, we realize how important we are being here, because we really are so important. You are so important. We are all here sharing this experience together on Earth. And it's remembering to really tune in to your intuition. Now, your intuition is generally quite subtle. It will be subtle. And if you don't tune into it, it will probably do something bigger to make you listen to it. So you need to tune into your intuition as much as possible. We do live in a world which really does sort of like push that away, or, what people might deem as the right thing, you might know deep down it's the wrong thing, but you just do it anyway. No, now is the time more than ever to actually listen to your intuition, to show up in the way that actually suits you, and just to remember how important you are. Never forget that. So I hope this episode landed well for you. Yeah, it was a little bit vulnerable on my part, because I think people think when they listen to this, they think, oh, Jolene never has any of these problems that I talk about. I'm going to tell you now, I've had all of these problems and I will still continue to have them because I am a human. There is no human on earth that doesn't go through anything. But to be able to share my insights with you in the hope that it might help you is the purpose of this podcast. So remember, as always, to lead through your life with your heart and to live with intention. Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with your friends and on social media. If you have the time to rate or review this podcast, I'd be ever so grateful. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, you can find me at Jolene Sensual Being. The links to my YouTube and to sign up to my mailing list will be in the show notes as well. I look forward to speaking with you again very soon.